everybody. Welcome back to Rock City Trio. I'm Catherine.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Adam.
And we have our good friend, Gavin, over here.
Hello, I'm Gavin.
Hi. Okay. So
He's our first
nervous.
guest.
this might be, we're going to be good. We're going to be natural. We're going to be smooth. I wanted to talk today about growing up differently and how it's shaped us a little bit. And I'll give you a little snippet about my life. I have very traditional parents. They're very conservative. They're not fans of tattoos and piercings. And I have 2 tattoos that they don't know about and a piercing that they don't know about.
Do you listen to the podcast?
What podcast?
Our
okay.
podcast.
Our podcast? Yeah, I listen to it. Do they listen?
Do they listen to the podcast?
I thought you asked, do I listen to a podcast?
Do you know what a podcast is?
Are your parents going to suddenly be traumatized by our podcast?
If they listen to the first episode, abso-fucking-lutely.
Okay, well, I guess hookup culture, geez.
Oh, yeah, where
Yeah.
I literally told everybody
yeah.
that I was a fucking slut.
Yeah.
So now if
Yeah.
they listen to the first episode or the 4th episode.
Well, we try to not talk about it in front of them.
Okay.
I got my nose pierced on Sunday and I went home. I went home, and my dad told me he loved me a little bit less. So
Wow, that's
it was
something.
joke, but it
Yeah.
hurt him on the inside. Okay.
Anyways, let's get back to
So
where you were at.
thank you. So I grew up a little differently. I got very traditional parents. I have a brother who's 5 years older than me, and he was the typical big brother, I guess you could say. He was the sports guy. He had lots and lots of friends. He was always really good in school, very determined. And then little old me came by. I was a theater kid. I was kind of nerdy. I was a little bit more goth and emo. I chose to be a loner a lot. Always kind of felt like a late bloomer in things. My first job was maybe at like 18. My brother's first job was at 15. So I always felt a little bit compared to my brother. Not that my parents ever did. Not that they literally would ever flat out say, your brother's doing a better job than you. My parents obviously loved us both very, very much. Just growing up and seeing how successful he was and how great he was doing in his life and how many friends he had and how smart he was. And just knowing that that wasn't in me. I wasn't the smartest girl in school. High school was very, very difficult for me. Making friends was very difficult for me. So growing up with that, kind of living almost in the shadow of my brother, again, subconsciously, this was my own thing I was dealing with. I think that's shaped me in a way that I have to accept that I am a little bit of a late bloomer in my life. I definitely have some insecurities and some anxieties that I'm dealing with, that I have dealt with. I got my license when I was like 19. I was way too afraid to drive. Always just kind of felt that I wasn't doing the best that I could do. Again, just seeing that my brother was always so great in school and he always went to a really good college. He did go to a really good college. And just kind of how he just did really, really well for himself. And I just kind of always felt like a little behind. So that's my little thing about how I grew up with an older brother who just kind of seemed he might be doing a little bit better than his younger sister, and how I kind of dealt with that, and how if anything, I've just learned that I need to take my time and I need to accept my path might just have some obstacles and I'll get there. I just have to accept the time that it takes, because I just kind of always felt like my brother, he was 15 and had a job, and he's always had a job since he was 15. And I was too scared to get a job. And he got a license at 16 and I was too afraid to drive. And then he got his first car at 17 and mom and dad had to help me with my car, those sorts of things. He was always just maybe a few steps ahead, and that's fine. So I just I compared myself to him a lot more.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you talk so much about comparing to older brother for you. For me, it's like I kind of had similar aspects with that for older siblings, because I have 2 older siblings, older sister and an older brother. And actually, my sister and I are similar age gap. I think for us, it's like 6 years.
Yeah,
so
I'm 5 years younger.
Yeah, so it's close to that. But for me, the more interesting one was the effects of my relationship with my brother, being that he is 9 years older than me. Okay. It wasn't always the best because of that. That was a very big age gap to kind of manage with. when I was younger, for me, that was a lot of looking up to him. And since he was so much older, it was finding me to be very much a nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that kind of my childhood, the way I would sum it up for me was kind of just trying to survive.
Okay.
Because being that he found me annoying and was usually bored with his friends, I kind of took the brunt of their entertainment in that way.
I was similar.
And so for me, I would sum up childhood as just kind of, trying to learn how to survive on my own.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because in a lot of those instances, my parents weren't always the most helpful.
Mm-hmm.
They were usually not the most present in those particular situations. So it was kind of figuring that stuff out on my own as I went.
Do you think with the age gap, do you think that did you see him do things that like you wanted to do? Like relating it back to my brother, like he got a good job. Did that make you feel like you wanted to get a good job? Did he inspire you to like work harder or anything like that?
Not as much, because I very much resented him early on enough. At first, I'd say yeah, but it was more so looking up to like, oh, I want to like that kind of music and be like that when I'm in high school, because it was more so when he was probably like 15, 16, 17 and I was like 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
So then by the time got to a point where it was even like an adult doing work and stuff like that, I had already kind of hated him.
I recently just stopped being Chris's little sister. Like I was always Chris's little sister. We went to the same high school. I obviously knew all of his friends, but like people would see me and be like, oh yeah, my last name's Cook. I guess I can say my last name, whatever. My last name's Cook. And people would be like, oh, you're Chris's little sister.
Yeah.
I'm my own person, everybody, but thanks.
A good number of the teachers and like just school people I had through basically high school was like, oh, like so-and-so's little sibling. It's like, yep. that's me. I don't know if that's a good thing.
A lot in school, except for like opposite reasons. Because my brother was a super underachiever and like didn't put in any effort really during his school years.
Yeah.
So when I went to school, they were like, oh, it's you.
Yeah.
For me, it was a little bit of both. They were always pleasant because they liked all, like both my siblings and myself, just because of our demeanor. Like we were just very easygoing and like we wouldn't cause problems. But my brother was an awful student and my sister was a fantastic student. And so it was kind of like, well, you're going to be a good kid. I just don't know what kind of student you'll be.
Right. Yeah. I was really similar.
It's more like my brother was not a good one.
This is fascinating to me because
oh my God, I love this.
I am a single child. Well, let me retract here. I'm one of 6 because my father would essentially knock up a woman and then go and start a new family. I'm the last of his children. I'm the youngest. And God rest his soul and all that fun stuff. But I didn't experience any of that. So I was... Because
you didn't grow up with them. They're all half siblings.
Exactly. So I don't really consider myself having a sibling. Obviously, I'm my mother's only kid. And I didn't get to know any of my brothers until recently. I'm in contact with one out of the other 5. So I never got to experience what it was like to get bullied by an older sibling, look up to an older sibling,
get taught by an older sibling.
To any of those things. That was not a part of my upbringing at all.
Yeah. I mean, looking back on it, I mean, okay, there are definitely things I would have changed. I am very happy that I have older siblings. I like being the youngest. I like having two older siblings, specifically too. I feel like that dynamic was great for learning in a lot of ways. But there were definitely some detrimental effects that it had caused for me.
Oh,
Right.
Absolutely. Me and my brother are almost 2 completely different people. And I mean, almost in every way, shape, and form. We are just I feel like just polar opposite type of people.
My brother and I are too similar in a lot of ways. And then the ones, like there's a few that were polar opposite, and that causes a lot of friction.
Well, Gavin, I've only met your older brother once, and I feel like you two are also very, very different. I also live with you, so
yeah. Me and my brother are 2 very different people, but I also have a little sister, and her and I are pretty much twins when it comes to personality.
Yeah.
Like we are exactly the same.
What are the age gaps, out of curiosity?
So my sister is almost 6 years younger than me, and my brother's 2 years older.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I
Interesting.
didn't realize
Actually,
he was
so
only that much older than you.
That's similar age gaps as mine, but you being in the middle.
Yeah.
I did have kind of a. Now I'm going to ask all three of this, and
Ask
I guess you can
away.
each answer individually, I suppose.
Ask, baby.
Being that my closest experience to this is, I essentially grew up with Kyle and Derek and my Uncle Dan, because my Uncle Dan is only 5 years older than me. And then Kyle is 1 year older than me, and my cousin Derek is 3 years younger. We all ended up in the same school. We were all very much like siblings. Kyle and Derek to this day would fucking kill for me. And I for them. And so I think that that sense of like a posse, that's your family in school. Now I wonder if did you ever feel more protected having, even though you have these similarities and a lot of differences, did you ever feel like that's my older sibling, they're always going to have my back, even when you were younger and you had these differences?
Very slightly, more so with my sister, because my sister and I got along. I did not feel that way for my brother, but that kind of makes sense because in my childhood, my brother was basically an abusive older sibling.
That makes sense.
And so, if anything, I felt much less safe around him. But there were a few instances where, because other family history type stuff, where there's a lot of like anger issues and stuff throughout my family, and so like, if one of my parents was particularly in a not so pleasant mood, where he would kind of step up to be the advocate for my sister and I, and basically take the heat in that way. So there were a few instances, but for the most part, not as much with him because of that, but definitely with my sister, because she did always have my back, and I always felt that.
And before you two answer, just to interject real quick, that's my point. I think so, because my cousins Justin and Clint also were part of that little posse too, and I have never really gotten along with them as well as Kyle and Derek. But I'll tell you, anytime those two faced a problem, we all would be like, "You're fucking with the wrong people,"
Right?
Like, and it's so interesting that like, even though we may not like each other, we love each other.
Oh,
It's so weird. But anyways, what was your guys' experiences?
Well, with my brother, I mean, we went to the same school as well, and it being really small. I mean, my brother is incredibly protective over me, even though we are polar opposites and we almost disagree on everything. He is incredibly protective over me, and all of his friends love to remind me, like, if we're drunk at the family Christmas party, all of his friends love to remind me that, like, dude, Chris is in love with you, man. Like, he would do anything for you, Catherine. You got to know that. And I'm like, no, I know. Cool, whatever. But I guess school-wise, the only thing I really remember is when I was in elementary school and I had a shopping bag of my Halloween costume and it fell out on the bus and I just started crying, and the bus driver pulled over the bus and she's like, "Chris, your sister's crying in the back. Will you help her pick up her costume?" And that's something I really cherish.
So he helped then, or
Yeah.
or did you just cherish the bus driver?
The bus driver for being like, "Catherine's being a little bitch up front. Will you come take care of this?"
The bus drivers who really had your
Over and
back.
out.
She's the one who saved the day.
Yeah. What
No,
about
my brother's always had my back.
I don't feel like my brother would have had my back.
Really?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Me and my brother, we were really close when we were really young. And then growing up, we just sort of separated. His friend groups were sort of the outcast, where mine was the artsy fartsy people. So like his friend groups would try to make fun of my friend groups, and my friend groups would make fun of his. So we sort of butt heads throughout all of school, especially because we were so close in age that we were going to school with each other at the same time.
What was it, Sharks, Jets?
I was just going to say, it's
Yeah.
West Side Story.
That sounds like it. I can kind of relate to that because even though my brother and I were 5 years apart, very, very small school. I think I graduated with maybe 50 kids. I don't know how many my brother
Got you
graduated.
beat.
Oh, by what, one?
No, because I went to Lima for the last couple of years, my graduating class was 15.
Wow.
That's kind of why I went there, is because I couldn't deal with the amounts of people at my previous school. And so
No, I
went
get
to a
that.
school with, I think, about 200 kids altogether, K through 12.
That's crazy. I
Yeah.
can't imagine that. But I was the theater kid. Like I was the nerdy. I was so different. I was like the black sheep out of like the four of us when I was in middle school. I loved like really heavy metal bands, and I thought the more band t-shirts I owned, the cooler I was. And
I still think that.
I do too. I just hide them all. I
Yeah.
hide all of my t-shirts because everyone's gonna judge me. But my brother was the jock. He played football and everybody knew him, and like he was, I don't know, just everybody knew him. And I was like the quiet younger sister, and him and I had nothing in common. And my parents didn't understand like the music I liked. And I was like, it's not a phase, Mom. And all of those things are just a melting pot of me, I guess.
Weirdly, I can relate to that as well. My brother was, even though he didn't really play many sports, he was kind of that still jock-like type, personality-wise. And even though I wasn't as much like theater artsy as a kid, very much in the nerd category, which really doesn't bode well for that. With a 9-year difference and stuff, it was not an ideal dichotomy for that. But I had that same kind of vibe with it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like 9 years would be so difficult. I mean, I know even with my brother and I just being 5 years apart, we are at two very different moments in our life.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But it is kind of hard to like relate.
That's why I mean, we're pretty solid at this point. And like kind of it's been coming to terms with those aspects of like, oh yeah, we were more so that he was going through stuff and then kind of realizing how much what he did had affected me and stuff. And so having come to terms with that while we're a bit older, while we're, both kind of more mature at this point and can see a little bit more eye to eye, that's helped a lot. Because during those times, like 9 to 18 is a much bigger difference than like 22 to 31, which is where we're at now. So
Right.
Can I ask you how you feel about having a younger sister?
I wish my younger sister was closer to me in age, because like growing up, when my sister was starting to like get attention from boys and stuff, I was just hitting my angst. So like then I became overprotective of her, which sort of hurt our relationship. But overall, I enjoy having a younger sister.
Yeah.
Because it's a different aspect on the world. Instead of two boys talking to my sister about stuff now that she's 15, almost 16, and maturing more, it's interesting to see what her perspective is. She was also, or is, she's still in school, the cool kid in school, where me and my brother were not at all. So it's weird seeing that side of what school is.
that'd be fascinating to just like observe.
Like, when I had friends over, it was the same two friends. She has like 5 friends at a time, and they cycle.
I never had that.
It's insane.
I never had 5 friends at a time.
Yeah, I had 5 friends all together. Like, what the hell?
I was gonna say, like, what was the old, was it T-Mobile that had the like 5 people you could call for and stuff? It's like that would be way more difficult. That part was very easy for me.
When MySpace had like your top 8 and then you could change it to top 5, I was like, can I just have like a top 2? Like, I don't need 5. I don't got 5.
It's funny too, because when Gavin and I were first hanging out, I had...
Oh, are you guys dating now? Are you guys like cool?
Yeah, we sleep in the same bed. That's why he...
That's my bed.
Well, yeah. When we first started hanging out, I had seen on Snapchat, I saw on Snapchat him and his sister, and I thought it was his girlfriend, because she's
beautiful.
She's a beautiful girl, and like not in a creepy way, because I'm
hitting on
fucking
Gavin's
28
little
years old.
sister right now?
But
I
she's
have a
let's
friend
not
that
go-
did. Now keep in mind,
They're closer in age.
They're close in age.
way closer in age.
Way closer in age.
But when I had
How
made
do you feel?
At first I was like, oh, I'm gonna kill him, and then I was like, but also he is like really close to our age, because we were in a band together.
Okay.
Here's the question: you had a friend that did, or you
No.
have a friend
Have.
that did?
Still,
Okay.
yeah, he's
and
still my friend.
he's only 2 years older.
Yeah,
So-
he's
No,
not
that's
much
not-
older.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's not that bad.
But it was interesting because it's like that disgust on your face when I had made the comment. I was like, "Oh, she's cute. Are you on it?" But I didn't know she looks so much older.
She does look very old.
She
for her
does.
age.
When our family went to Hawaii, my dad and my mom couldn't go ziplining with us, so it was just me and my brother. And there was like maybe 3 or 4 other couples. We were the only brother-sister couple. Literally everybody else was on their honeymoon.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, why'd you guys get married? And we're like, never.
See, you want to hear something very different? Was there were times where my brother would take me to like say Wegmans or whatever, and people would ask like,
Is that your kid?
yeah,
Oh,
about
That
being
happens to
outside.
my Uncle
Be
Mark with me
insane.
all the time. He used to drive him nuts.
Yeah.
Well, you two, I mean, that is your dad.
Yeah, essentially.
Bum, bum, bum.
But yeah, so we talked a bit about that. What was your defining difference growing up, Gavin?
Oh my God, I love that you're the mediator. I love that.
So my father passed on at a very early age. I think I was 4, no older than 5 when he passed away. And so that was an interesting aspect. Like my mom wouldn't let us, me and my brother, watch Lion King because she thought it would make us think that it was our fault.
Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, what?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to watch Lion King.
Whoa, what?
Why would that make you think that
Sorry.
you're, wait.
You're fine.
So she, okay.
I mean, either way, I could see that being like a concerning, like this is a lot, but that specific takeaway seems like an odd one to me of blame.
She's never explained why. I always ask her like why Lion King out of everything.
Well, have you seen The Lion King?
I love the Lion King.
And there's a new one coming out.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Oh, that's right.
Beyonce.
Beyonce's in my bitch
So-
Childish Gambino.
I was gonna say
Oh my
Glover.
God.
I'm looking forward to it. James Earl Jones. I think
Gavin's gonna be in it as Simba because it's your fault.
Hans Zimmer's back with it.
God, dude, that's not funny. Oh, no.
So,
Oh, no.
oh Jesus! Both of our fathers have passed on. It's great. I share this. Obviously, I think you even not. I'm not tooting my own horn or anything, but I think
Toot.
when you and I had first really started to like connect, you had mentioned to me that I was one of the first people you really opened up about
Yeah.
all this stuff too, and it really resonates with me as well. Very different though, because you really didn't have your father at all, whereas I had very little of him and was
Right,
always
yeah.
wondering why I wasn't good enough for more.
During his funeral, my grandma tells me this story all the time for some reason. I was at the pictures, like all the pictures that they have hanging up, and I had to ask them which one was my dad.
Whoa.
He was not very, because like my mom and dad separated probably when I was like 1 or 2. So I have no real memories of him. And then she started dating who was her high school sweetheart originally, my current, like my stepdad. So I've had a father, but I've also lived with the fact that like, well, it's not your real dad.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I don't call him stepdad. I call him dad and stuff like that because he's the dude that raised me.
Right.
And he was like, I thought your dad was dead. I'm like, well, like he is, but not this one.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And that's an interesting thing to have to explain to people too, that you're, and that goes, I mean, this is rooted in us now too. I think this is something that we all learn, that just because you're blood does not mean you're family
100%.
or
Right.
you're the parent.
100%.
It's a lot to do with that, that interest in giving and nurturing. It doesn't necessarily have to be blood. So how do you think that affected you growing up though?
Not
Not having that, your father.
dad.
I mean,
That sounds horrible when you say it out loud.
I guess it could be because it didn't nearly affect me as much as it did my brother because I was so young when he passed.
That's true.
And when my mom started dating my current dad, because I was too young, so I grew up with him, whereas my brother
Had just enough
Had
of that
your dad.
experience.
had enough of my father to know who he is, remembered our visits, and resented my stepdad because he was like, well, you're not Ken.
Yeah, which obviously throws a huge wrench into the
Right.
works for the rest of him growing up.
He
Yeah.
grew up way different than me. So my brother has had a lot of issues with addiction. He was homeless for an extended period of time, where I sort of grew up in a family that seemed to have like a white picket fence. I think that's where a lot of my abandonment issues come from,
Whoa.
Heard that.
Whoa.
because like I may not remember it, but I feel like it sort of messed with me because like
Yeah.
during his visits, there were times because he needed a mediator because he was an addict. So our aunt would watch us and he wouldn't even show.
Whoa.
Yeah, he'd disappear for like months on end to go on drinking benders and
Okay.
yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, but
It's interesting.
I think I was lucky because I was young enough to not really remember experiencing it.
Right.
Whereas my brother was just old enough
Yeah.
for his huge development.
There's like some weird,
But
bizarre
there's-
silver lining
There's
of it.
this interesting thing because, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I guarantee you're going to resonate with this. My uncle Mark and I have talked about this extensively because he knows what a pivotal role he's made in my life as my only father figure, because my mom did not remarry or anything like that until I was 15 years old. So my stepdad now I only have known for 12 years. But the interesting thing is people don't seem to understand that even though that person was missing from your life, like my father would come around once a year and I would constantly, he would constantly tell me, I'll come visit you, whatever. He loved me very much, but he was fucked in ways that I couldn't even begin to
he just
describe.
wasn't a father.
He wasn't a
figure.
father, but he loved me and I loved him because he was my father. But the thing that people don't seem to understand is just because you didn't know that person, like they say, you don't miss what you don't know. That's not true, because that yearning that you weren't good enough to be had, that you like that your wanting of acceptance from your biological father is incredibly important. And even though you had a father growing up, I did not, but you did. It's still not your dad. And there's like that want, you know what I mean? That nurturing element.
I sort of understand what you. I think the big difference is my mom left my father.
My mom left my father too.
Okay. So I never really felt the need for like to know him until much later in my life.
So
Like 16, 17 is when I was like regretting
Curious.
not growing up with him.
right, and that is about the time it hit me too.
Yeah.
After my father passed away when I was 14, and I had on and off relationship with him up until that point, a couple times a year or whatever. And it wasn't until I was a man, like 18, 20, where I started to ask myself, why was I not ever good enough? He lived 10 minutes away. Why was it always my mother of all people who left him for good reason,
Right.
that made the initiative for me to see him? She wanted me to have a father, and she made the contact in order for me to see him. Like I was always being dropped off to see him because of her. It was never him coming to me.
Right.
This doesn't have to be in it. I thought there was a point where he ran into the two of you and she
And yeah, I have no problem with this being in here.
okay.
Yeah,
And she
so
was like,
at
hell no.
Yeah. At one point, and that's because there had been this teeter-totter the whole
Okay.
time. Because of this, he constantly would say, I'm going to come over, and then he'd never show up. So I'd be
okay.
like sitting at the fucking window waiting for my dad to show up, and he wouldn't fucking come.
My little
Here's
baby
little
Timmy.
9-year-old Tim. I'm getting like, ugh. And so one time when I was probably about 12 years old, my mom and I used to go on like little walks together. We were at the Clifton Springs Hospital. We lived in Canandaigua at the time, which is also where he lived. We were at the Clifton Springs Hospital, and he just like pulled up in his car. Oh, hey, how are you guys? Blah, blah, blah. And my mom was like, you can either be in your son's life or you can get the fuck out. And she was just like very blunt, like, you can't keep doing this to him. You're like literally creating psychological damage. Keep on telling him that you're going to show up and then you never fucking come. So, and then he was just like taken aback. He's like, whoa, geez, I guess I won't, fuck me for having stopped. And then I was mad at my mom at the time because 12 years old and I want my dad.
Well, yeah, you don't think that part all the way through yet.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I was, and God bless my mother, she is the fucking light of my life. I mean, she was with me for his funeral, everything. She didn't have to do any of that. She didn't even like the guy. I mean, she loved him, but she didn't like him. And it was later on in life when I realized like the things that she did for me to kind of try to not shelter me, but to protect me from those things.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, Adam, did I cut you off?
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on before we got too far away from it too is what you were saying too about that kind of yearning, that like the
Yearning for, even though they weren't there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just an interesting fact about that too, that my brother was telling me about at one point because my nephew's adopted.
Right.
And going through that process, one thing they had to go through like specific counseling type stuff to prepare for it. I believe I might be misquoting this stuff a little bit or like the process, but at one point in that information process, they were informed that even though they adopted him at birth, like they were there when he was born and like literally ended up taking him home from the hospital from that time. Even at that point, that type of psychological effect will still probably be something that they'll need to work through at some point.
Yeah, there's a nature aspect to it. Because like a baby can sense its mother's heartbeat, whether if you're adopted as soon as you're born, you're still growing up and being made into a human in the womb. So you're hearing the heartbeat constantly. My mom has a friend that actually adopted a child, and that child growing up tried to stab her like multiple times because she.
Do you remember, like, do you know what, like at what age?
Super young, maybe like 2 months.
Yeah. Interesting.
When they adopted her, and like 5 or 6, I believe it was.
Yeah.
But like, I think that has to do with the nature aspect of like,
no, absolutely.
I don't really relate to this parent figure. And then I couldn't imagine being the parent in that situation though.
So yeah, it's just kind of interesting that all of that, like it really points to that fact that, there's a yearning there. There's a very natural aspect of that where, whether or not you know what you're missing, like that you're going to miss it.
So do you think that has affected your adulthood, like growing, like knowing that you're growing up without a dad or like yearning for him?
I think I got the best out of a worse situation or out of a terrible situation because I did grow up with a father and I had family friends whose dads were father figures to me. So I don't think it would have changed me that much.
Okay.
I think if my biological father was in my life, I'd be a lot worse off.
That's what I was going to ask.
Because he had a really bad addiction and he couldn't find his way out of it no matter how much he tried.
Probably like it could have helped
I
drag
think
you
it would have
down in
dragged
that process.
me, my mom, my brother. We wouldn't have my sister because my sister's my half sibling.
No.
ask
You're okay. So you're answering the question based off of them still being together, but because I've thought about this extensively as well, and I think, and maybe, I mean, we were just talking about this about the cemetery thing. So I know that it's had some kind of effect to where you're interested in who he would have been, how you would have interacted with him as an adult is an interesting question because
that's true.
I don't think I would have been well off if my father and mom. I'm glad that happened,
Right.
But as the man I am today, I think I could hang out with my dad and be totally smitten by him because he was charming. He wasn't a bad person. He did bad shit because he couldn't get out of his own fucking way. I think as not as a son, but as somebody, as a friend almost, I could hang out with my dad today. If that makes sense.
I think if my dad was still around, easily I'd hang out with him.
Right.
And growing up, my mom, because obviously the drug addiction and alcohol addiction didn't start till later. Growing up, my mom's like, "You are just like your father." So we have the same personality type and all that. So I think if my dad was in my life now, it would be different, but I'd 100% be willing to accept him into my life.
Right. Interesting.
That is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously I've had both of my parents.
Right.
Like I could never imagine. But
Yeah, it's a...
But I mean, both of you have obviously gone through things in your life that have made you accept that idea, that knowing that even though your fathers probably weren't the best people in the world and they've gone through their own shit, you guys have gone through your own shit to kind of maybe have a better understanding of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and my father, in a sense, has helped me to realize what I'm likely to become if I go too far.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like with the
warning
addiction,
signs. Yeah.
Wow.
Addiction, because I know my dad was an addict and I grew up hearing that he had an issue and really was a good person but couldn't get out of it. I avoid drinking too often, drugs, all that stuff, just simply because I knew or know that I could end up like my father.
Wow.
Yeah, I not as directly, but I keep an eye on it in a similar manner, just be like based off of the stories of for me it wasn't anyone in that level, but the generation above that, where particularly on my mother's side, addiction was very, very much a problem. And arguably I would say my mother would have a problem with it if she had ever even like toyed with stuff like that, but she never, like, she just avoided it completely because of it. And so like for say drinking and stuff like that, I've had to be very careful with it because of it.
Well, yeah, growing up, I was gung-ho until probably 19. I was gung-ho about being completely sober.
Yeah.
Like 100% sober. I mean, I dabbled in the devil's lettuce.
Marijuana.
The
like-
jazz cabbage.
Yeah, the jazz cat.
Devil's
But
lettuce.
like until like 19,
Oh my fucking God.
It's a good thing that's your microphone.
You're going to get fucking pink eye.
I
will
hope
not.
he does.
I just want to make sure that everybody knows Tim literally lifted his ass off of the chair, stuck his fucking microphone on his taint, and fucking farted.
I've done that on camera before. It's fine.
Oh my God.
Pants
I
on
live
or
in a house of
Pants on.
animals.
God, where's
Sorry.
the video?
You're not sorry. No
It's
fucking like that. Like
youtube.com/mellowbomb.
you're sorry. We needed to like kind of break the tension.
Yeah,
so,
this
no.
is a lot of heavy shit. I was
It
on the
is a
verge
lot
of
of heavy
tears
shit.
5 minutes ago. Here we are.
It's a
What
lot of
video
heavy
was that
shit.
Oh,
It sounds like it's coming from your mouth. Like it sounds. He's made these noises before with his mouth.
Did you ever see the video of the person that farted a perfect, I think it was like E major scale, and then remixed it without any pitch adjustments to made a song out of it? It was
the
beautiful.
next
you seen-
evolution of that needs to be having someone put it into Beat Saber.
Have you seen the guy that made drumming with asses?
Oh, that's right. I wasn't nearly as professional because I'm not the best with music theory, but yeah.
Was that the video you? Or
I think I showed that to
when
you
we
when we
were
were
recording.
recording.
Baby got
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
What? Do you want rosé wine? That's all I have.
What's in the
Just
freezer?
a-
Is
just
there,
a little bit.
Hang on. We'll take an intermission real quick. Let me. So here's the perfect time to tell you what we're all drinking.
Oh.
Gavin is working on not becoming an alcoholic. I am drinking Naked Dove, Naked Berry.
That is really good.
It is.
I don't know what I'm drinking.
You're drinking a rye whiskey. I don't recall the name.
wasn't
of it.
Russell something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a rye. It's not the rye that
I know. I just wasn't sure. It wasn't one of the Crown Royals, right?
Mm-mm.
Because you had one of those in
That
there
was
for a while.
That was Crown Royal Maple.
Gotcha.
And I am drinking Woodbridge Rosé because I'm a basic ass white bitch, and her wine needs to taste like a melted ass popsicle.
Hey, that sounds really good now. When you put it like that.
Don't tempt Gavin.
All wine is disgusting.
You don't like wine?
White
I
wines are
hate
good.
wine.
I love wine.
Hate
Sweet
wine.
wines is the only one I can drink because it tastes like juice.
Yeah.
Moscato.
I've tried so much wine,
Riesling.
and it's just awful.
Oh, I had Riesling last night and it was so disappointing. I stole
Was
it from
it?
my mom's house.
So, Catherine and Adam had very similar aspects to their childhood that kind of shaped who they are. Gavin and I have similar aspects that shaped who we are. But I think the most profound thing that shaped what I am, who I am. Who are you?
Words are hard.
I'm Batman.
Edit that out. I don't want to hear that later.
I do.
You'll hear it. And you'll hear it and you'll like it.
I'm going to cut out the rest of the podcast.
It's just air.
It's just done right here.
2 seconds of you just saying, I'm Batman.
I'm gonna use it as my ringtone.
The most profound thing that I basically had to grow up with and learn to deal with is my visual impairment. So my vision is corrected to 20/70, and that is the best it gets. There's no such thing as LASIK vision for me. I'm colorblind, so red looks like black that does not illuminate for the traffic lights, etc. What?
I was going to say, you'll be fine in like 50 years though, right?
Maybe.
Get it? Because 2070.
This is a genuine question. It's only because you tell me this all the time, like what your vision is corrected, but I still don't have a general idea of how poor your sight is. Like,
So
I wear
Dumb
other
it-
people's glasses.
can I
what I
shut
do.
up, Gavin.
So
Dumb it-
2070, to my understanding, would be at 20 feet for you is like what healthy vision would be for someone at 70 feet.
Is that how that works? Because I have no idea.
That's correct.
Oh, so like 20 feet ahead of you is like blurry as shit?
It's as clear as 70 feet is for a normal person.
Yeah, at 20
So
feet.
yes, it's
So-
harder to make
So
out.
that's bad.
At 70 feet for you, seeing clearly, I have to be up to 20 feet. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Eyes are
what it takes.
hard.
Seeing is hard.
Yeah, see,
Oh, yeah, it is hard for me.
I think and also to clarify, that's as much as yours can correct to. That's not how bad yours is
Yeah, my
to start.
vision is 2100 without glasses.
Yeah.
There
I
it
think
is.
I think mine are just like 20, 30 or something. Mine's so light. And then like just getting fixed with is very easy. And apparently
Guys,
something funny happened.
are you laughing at my fucking
Did Catherine fart
visual
again?
impairment?
you lose.
I'm sorry.
You've had like a sip of wine.
Bitch, this is my third glass.
Yeah, bitch.
Oh no, this explains a lot. And Tim
not
starts,
very nice.
And Tim starts peeking.
You're right. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say
Or,
there's the
yeah.
peak.
Look at it. Look at Tim peeking over there.
I'm gonna go up a fucking peak and jump off because nobody cares about what I
I'm
have
sorry.
to
Take
say.
me with you.
Keep our giggling in. Our giggling was cute. Gavin and I shared a moment, and y'all missed it.
I'm editing that
off.
out, but I'm
What
keeping it.
is that?
Fucking
My child.
Or there's two of them
I
for
thought
you.
you
Fuck off.
almost said my childhood. Okay, I'm so sorry. 2070. I had no idea what that meant. Thank you for clearing that up.
Is that a fucking blind joke? Clearing that up?
So,
It wasn't meant to
can
be.
I ask you something?
Ask me something?
Yeah. His keys are color coded.
I asked him. I brought in the color coded that like I use so we can match because fuck it. And I was like, "Can you see?" And he's like, "Yeah, unless you lied to me."
Well, no, because sometimes when the lighting is just right, the green one, it's green, right? There's
Yes.
a green one.
Yep.
The green and the blue one, because there's a yellow one too.
Yeah.
And
Now when
usually-
you say that out loud, I'm like, I picked the three colors that could be mixed up.
the green and the blue one in specific lighting, the one looks like the other.
Okay.
Depending on, it doesn't matter though. He sees me struggle with it sometimes when he brings me home from
so
school.
funny.
Can I ask you a quick question? How does it feel to have your impairment be the only one that people haven't respected while talking through all of
I
this?
know, isn't that fucking
I'm so
hilarious?
sorry. I started it. I'm
The-
sorry.
the-
It's
the-
my fault.
the one-
You're making me feel like a really shitty girlfriend
Yeah.
because we just talked about everything.
No, there's not really too much to say for my. I mean, I just had to learn. My mother had to teach me and kind of like really hit home that I had to be my own best advocate because I had something going against me. Where I've seen people, my own relatives, that have the same visual impairment who have done nothing. They've gone nowhere. They've done nothing, and it's just as easy to give up and do nothing. They've lived on SSI their whole lives and never aspired to live outside of their comfort of what they know. So my mother worked very, very hard as a single mom, teaching me to be even stronger than what a normal kid would have to be growing up with normal vision. I mean, and I, to be honest with you, and this sounds so stupid, my visual impairment was a target for people. That was one of the main things people bullied me for in high school and middle school. I was always afraid of education, going to school. I would skip school at least a couple times a week because I had enlarged textbooks and I didn't want to be seen as differently. And people used to pinpoint that as a way to bully me. And like gym class was no fucking fun for me. I'll promise you that. Cause you know, yellow is especially in the gym, where there's all those lights and,
Yeah.
and all the, oh my God, not flare, but the
Fluorescent?
the glare
Glare.
from the lights on the floor, the
And the
shiny
floors
floor.
are kind of like a yellow base.
Yeah,
If we did anything with like a yellow ball, I wouldn't see it at all. It could fucking hit me in the face, like literally, because I wouldn't see it, and my depth of field is horrible. And I just remember I got into a physical altercation once because they were bullying my cousin Clint, who has way worse vision than me, if you can imagine that. Like imagine someone, his vision corrected is 2200, corrected
2200.
2200.
Okay. Wow.
2200. Yeah. And I remember just
Like 3 times worse.
fucking slamming this kid in because he was kept on making fun of him. And I that's the kind of shit that I'm talking about that I would have to kind of push back on, is like, I don't want to be seen as different. And it's so funny that now today, I mean, I had an art teacher in high school tell me that I couldn't join the painting class because I was colorblind. And it's like, fuck you. I was interested in art. I couldn't join that class because of that. And here we are, 26 years old. I had an art show and sold paintings.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so funny that everything that I do today is visual.
Yeah.
So learning that I can do that too, and probably am good at it.
You are good at
It's
it.
something that I had to kind of struggle with, especially as a teenager, when you have all that teen angst anyways.
Right.
Well, people are going to look at me, especially when people started to get their licenses and shit, and I knew that I couldn't fucking get mine.
Yeah.
And it's like people were taking their first girlfriends on dates and shit. I mean, when I was dating my first real girlfriend, I mean, she was driving me everywhere. She was very good about it. She knew, I mean, just like that I have a visual impairment, and that is the way it is.
I do remember when we first started hanging out, like I drove to your house and I think you wanted to go get cigarettes. And I was like, okay, well, since I drove here, can you drive? And you were just like,
Well, no. And I told you, no. Yeah, we were like hanging out, and I told you, I need to let you know right now that I have a visual impairment.
well, that's how it
and
came
if
up,
that's a
though,
make it or break it.
is that and that I was just like, since I drove all the way here, like you
Yeah,
drive to go get cigarettes, and you're just like, I can't drive.
Yeah.
I didn't say it like that.
I didn't say it at all like that. I very specifically was just rehashing the exact conversation we had.
I can't drive.
So, do you think being colorblind drove you to do all the visual stuff?
Ooh, that is a
Because
good
even
question.
your films are super color oriented.
Yeah, you always talk
Yeah.
about how you want that color contrast.
So my colorblindness is not black and white like people think.
Wait, you're not a dog?
I'm not a dog.
I do, but no, I do think that's like a general,
there's-
because my dad's colorblind and I thought that too.
But there's different kinds of colorblindness. There's red green, which is very common. There's red green. There's blue green. There are shades of gray. Like my Uncle Steve, who's my grandfather's brother, my great Uncle Steve, he sees in black and white. We all have very different color blindness.
Yeah, and they're all to varying extents too. It's not like you're
Exactly.
just like, oh yeah, I have that one. It's like I have that one to this degree, to that degree.
So when you say like brown green, does that mean it's like it? What did you say?
Red green
Red
is a very
green.
common one. That's not one. Red and green are very different to me, but that's a common one.
So, but I guess what I mean is like when you say that, do you mean people see in like hues of red and green?
No, people get red and green mixed up.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I think your dad has red green.
I think
we
so.
talked about it. It's very mild. That's a very mild, very normal like color blindness.
He's always explained things as just being like dingy to him.
Yeah. So mine is really wacky. There's no classification for it.
That's wacky.
Yeah, red, like really deep red, like blood red, looks like black. And so like I confuse like neon green and neon yellow, which is confusing to a lot of people anyways that aren't colorblind, supposedly. Purples and blues, depending on the shade. But my colorblindness isn't that bad, really, in comparison.
It's just the combination of
It's
that
the combination
with the visual impairment.
and the fact that I can't see that red, and that red does not illuminate. That's what makes it so.
From what like we've talked about, or like questions that you've asked, like is it this color or that color? It seems to me it's more like your deep dark tones of colors you could confuse, and then your like bright, not like neon bright, but your pastels you
Yep, the
get confused.
pastels, because
Okay.
like the baby pink and the baby blue looks the same.
My nails are baby pink right now, and he
Yep,
thought they were
I
like
thought
a,
they were
a
like a
sky,
sky
blue,
Interesting.
which is
Yep.
not at all.
Do you think that that's part of the reason then we tend to lean towards very like neon, like very bright, vibrant colors
So
to
for,
stuff?
for me, I think that when I first saw the films Drive and The Neon Demon, I was very, very drawn into those colors because I can see them so well and how flashy they are. And I love flashy colors, like my orange bomber jacket that I've got. Like I fucking love that color. Purples, all that. But to answer your question, as far as like the color blindness, do I think that I think that I was proving something to somebody, myself. Eventually I realized it was myself. But I think at first it was like this like me fighting back towards people that told me my whole life that I couldn't do something.
Kind of a subconscious defiance to it.
Yeah, but there's a bit of defiance because I have to tell you that I also was told my entire life that I wouldn't be able to drive from day one. And when I was 22 years old, I worked up the courage to be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to go try to get my permit. And I fucking got it. I passed well enough with the visual aspect that they gave me my permit. And then when I started driving, because I drove for like 6 months, actually. My cousin Kyle was a great teacher. He was very patient with me. He would come by and drive with me like once a week. And I was driving in very heavy traffic areas, Victor, like near the mall. And that was when I realized that I can't do it because it's not the visual aspect that I can't do it with. Like as far as like my being able to see like my 2070, it was the color blindness that's hindering my ability to drive. The red is such a huge factor in driving. You got stop signs, you got traffic lights, you got tail lights, and I can't fucking see any of it.
I remember you just telling me that you can't see it illuminate. Like you can't just see that people, like when people tap their brakes or things like that.
Well, and think of it this way. For one, that red that's used in cars looks like black. So imagine it just looking like a black room.
Right.
That taillight is a black room. There's nothing there. And then when the light turns on, because it's still red, it doesn't turn on. I can see it in overcast and I can see it at nighttime, which was so interesting to me that when I explained this to my eye doctor, that he put a limitation on my driving to I can't drive past when it turns dark. Which I was like I see opposite. Better at night. I would only, honestly, like today, if he was like, hey, I'm going to give you a license, you can drive from dusk till dawn. Then I'd be like, fuck yeah. Because I know I can do it. I see better at nighttime in general.
I've also noticed that, I just remember one time when we were driving the Adirondacks, it was definitely like an older model car where the taillights weren't as bright red as they are now. They were definitely more orange. And I remember he tapped his brakes and you were just, I don't know, you're just like, I just saw that dude's taillights. Like, that's weird. I don't remember seeing taillights ever.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense with older models.
Yeah. So, very interesting.
Yeah, so growing up, I had to learn to basically be my own best advocate. There's so many things that went into it. I had to tell teachers, hey, I can't see that. And in college, that's the first thing I tell my professors. Listen, I have a visual impairment. I don't want to be treated any differently. I will sit in the front. I will ask you questions if I need to, but please don't treat me any differently.
Well, I remember that being issues in some of our classes that we had together a ton too, where it's like, like they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. Let me, like, I can accommodate and help with that, and then not really accommodating almost at all.
Well, in those particular classes, I feel like that was, and it's not an excuse. I'm not making excuses for them because especially in a learning environment, especially in college when there should be accommodations, that shouldn't be an excuse.
Right.
But I think in those particular classes that we were taking for new media, they're very visual driven, and he has all these students he has to take at the same pace. That's true. And it's all on a projector. Luckily for me, I had you and Sarah and Ben and even Mark for some of it to really help me. Yeah. Otherwise, I would have fucking failed those classes. Yeah. Or had to drop them. Those 2 or 3 classes that we, like even audio for film, which was, she was teaching on a projector. I couldn't see it.
Once you get like, half of that wasn't too bad, but then once you get into the actual like audio editing programs, that's where like kind of fell apart for you a bit more. Right. It's like, yeah, because there's so many like fine tools in that seeing that on a projector is not going to be easy at that point.
No.
So those were some fun projects though.
Yeah. So just learning to be my own best advocate with having, that's how I found my voice. I mean, honestly, I had to be like an adult in some weird way by sticking up for myself at such a young age. And then like that bullying aspect too, like learning that people are going to take that one little fucking difference and use it against you. And I got it from adults too. Like to this day, I wish I could run into our art teacher that told me,
no, I know exactly who you're talking about.
'Cause fuck you.
Yikes. Okay.
Seriously, that's not what a teacher does.
No.
At all.
No.
So.
But it's funny. Like it seems like I know Gavin and I laughed. Adam was respectful and didn't really laugh as much as Gavin and I did.
Fuck you, Adam.
Be more disrespectful. But like we laugh at it because we don't deal with it. We think it is so easy just to see color. But if anything, I've learned with you dealing with your impairment and you being the artist that you are, I've definitely learned that, like, as cheesy as it sounds, like, you can really do anything that you want to do. And I do find it interesting that you did kind of, you were told that you couldn't do it, and you were just like, fuck you, I can. And I'm literally surrounded by your art all the time, and it's great. And I think you are so talented, and I think that's awesome that you were just like, hey, fuck you.
Well, that's just it too. And I think that, again, just my mother being the saint that she is taught me the most valuable lesson at such a young age, and that's just to never limit yourself. And I mean, that was such a pivotal learning experience for me early on. I mean, at the age of 5, you know, her taking me aside and telling me to try things no matter what, even if I wasn't good at them.
Yeah, I like that.
So, yeah, and here we are.
And here we are.
So,
do we want to
wrap it and tap it.
Do we want to wrap it and tap it?
Wrap it and tap it.
So Gavin,
I feel like could talk about this for so much longer too.
we 100% could.
We could always talk about it again another time.
We could.
'Cause
Gavin, would you like to give a 1-sentence summary of how your childhood has shaped you to be who you are? No, the answer is no.
I feel like it's important to just know that who is in your life doesn't shape you nearly as much as pushing yourself does.
I like that. That's good.
Right.
I think I've said it a few times already that it's okay to take your path and take your time on your path. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, things kind of happen for a reason. I'm a firm believer in a path. So it's okay to just kind of take your time with things. You're not a loser. Catherine, 13-year-old Catherine, you are not a loser. You're good. Take your time. That's what I'd like to say.
I think what I want to say, ironically, isn't based as much on what I talked about.
Okay.
But
Okay.
is just the concept of you have to, well, I mean, I guess I'm kind of taking off of yours a bit as well, Tim, where it's you have to fight through life and fight to keep moving and growing. And a lot of the time for me, I find that to be frustrating and discouraging, but just to see the beauty in that and
I like
the growth
that.
of that.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. I think my closing piece of advice for everybody out there is to never allow anyone to summarize your existence as one thing that defines you.
All good. I liked all of these.
Yeah, you are not just one thing. You are an accumulation of so many things. And you cannot allow yourself to be limited to somebody's one way of thinking about you.
You're
was
limitless.
Good. You're limitless.
Great movie.
Push it.
Well, that might have been a little bit more of a serious topic for us, but thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you all for listening again so much. This has been Rock City Trio. Thank you, Gavin, for being our first guest on the show.
Gavin.
We have been
Gavin.
really enjoying doing this podcast, so please look forward to our releases every Friday. And yeah, it's been a good time talking, so we will talk to you all later. Bye.
Thanks, you guys. Bye.
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 I'm Batman.